friends, Andrew here, hope you're well. This year, the iPad Pro M2 only appeals to a small niche of people, and the majority are probably wondering, is that it when it comes to this year's iPad Pro? But it should appeal to those who have a significantly older iPad, or those of you who may want to add more portability into your working lives. I still think this year's iPad Pro is a great purchase for some, and after spending 200 hours with this iPad Pro M2 and working from it alongside my MacBook, here is my review and honest opinion on who will actually benefit from this new iPad most. Okay, so let's start by listing out everything new on the new iPad Pro M2. We have a new M2 chip that's supposedly 15% faster than the M1 chip, something I'll test out in just a moment. Then we now have also Wi-Fi 6E with speeds of up to 2.4 gigabytes per second, meaning if you have a great internet connection at home, the iPad Pro will be able to take full advantage of it. We also have this cool new Apple Pencil hover trick, which is actually genuinely useful, and I'll demonstrate later in this video. And then it now supports ProRes video recording for the first time, but very controversially. I wasn't able to take advantage of this ProRes video recording. It doesn't seem to natively be integrated into the camera app yet, and upon some digging, we currently aren't able to take advantage of ProRes video recording without third-party apps. This might be a bug that will be fixed in the upcoming iPadOS updates, so let's give them the benefit of doubt. Oh yeah, and we do not get Touch ID, which is featured on the iPad Air, but the iPad Pro is the only iPad to have Face ID. I guess having both Face ID and Touch ID kind of cancels each other out, so it's kind of redundant anyway. Because of the underwhelming number of changes, I think it'd be far more interesting to compare the new iPad Pro M2 to the older generations of the iPad rather than just the previous iPad Pro M1. From what I've seen in tests, the generational leap is where the true value is at for the majority of people who have significantly older iPads. And so let's do exactly that. Now let's compare the new M2 iPad Pro with the 5th generation iPad Pro with the A12 chip, and also with the more closer relative, the iPad Air M2. Starting with the new 8-core M2 processor, everyone knows the M architecture is great at this point. And unsurprisingly, it is no different here on the new iPad Pro. Running a Geekbench 5 test, it scored 1,886 for the single core test and 8,451 for the multi-core test. So for the most part, Apple's performance claims are accurate. For comparison, the iPad Pro 5th generation with the A12 chip scored 1,126 for the single core test and 4,678 for the multi-core test. So a significant generational leap in the performance from the A12. I think that's something to definitely consider for those of you who have older iPads. And then the 2022 iPad Air, also with the M2 chip, scored 1,711 for the single core test and 6,987 for the multi-core. It's probably worth pointing out that my base MacBook M2 Air scored 1,899 for the single core and 7,651 for the multi-core CPU test. So it's really interesting to see that the MacBook M2 Air is almost on par with the iPad Pro M2 itself in terms of this specific benchmark performance. This also begs the question if users should go ahead and get the MacBook Air M2, which I'll answer later in this video. So unsurprisingly, you're getting range-topping performance with the new iPad Pro and significantly improved graphical performance here too. And although this is great for professionals who rely on their iPads as part of their careers, I think this incremental boost in performance won't be a life changer for most, especially if you're coming from the iPad M1. And this leads me on to iPadOS 16, because frankly, as good as it is, it just does not take advantage of the insane M2 power. Stage Manager, even with its hiccups during beta, is a glimpse into the potential of the iPadOS 16 and taking it to the next level and its multitasking capability if iPadOS is transformed. I would personally love to see a bespoke operating system created for the iPad and iPad only, rather than having its foundation built from iOS. That's when I think we'll see it perform as a true multitasking experience that rivals most laptops, and it's able to then juice out the performance of this M2 chip. And the truth is, the M1 chip is already an incredibly powerful chip in which only very few maxed out its capability. So in some ways, the M2 leap in power is only a nice to have, not a must to have. This would completely change if we had a bespoke operating system that could run desktop level apps like Final Cut Pro, Photoshop, or even Blender on an iPad Pro. This is likely some time away though, if even a reality. That all said, there's no denying the M2 processor is absolutely powerful, and people coming from previous generations of the iPad Pros or even other lines of the iPad altogether are going to seriously appreciate this power. If you're coming from the M1 processor, well, it's likely you'll be underwhelmed with the power bump considering how capable the M1 chip already is. I want to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, Masterworks. There were 10 million people who started investing in 2020, or if you're like me and already had money invested, we were riding a high. 5 tech stocks accounted for 37% of the market's returns in 2020, but now it's taken a turn and many tech stocks are seeing a downturn. A recent survey found 75% of wealthy investors aged 21 to 42 think it's now impossible to achieve above average returns with stocks and bonds. They're probably right. The average retail investor is down 44% this year, according to research. Experts from Morgan Stanley advise to protect wealth through diversification. They've called out several alternatives outside of stocks, one of them being fine art. Masterworks lets you invest in million-dollar artwork for a fraction of the cost. These are paintings from household names like Banksy, Picasso, Monet. You don't have to be an art collector to recognize these big names. Last week, Masterworks sold a painting for a 17.8% return, and in 7 of their last 8 exits, they've returned over 17% net returns to investors. That is pretty impressive. So over 550,000 people have signed up for Masterworks, and paintings have sold out in minutes. And the good news is my subscribers get priority access into Masterworks. Just click the link in the description to skip the waitlist. And it's worth pointing out that I am not a financial advisor, so this isn't financial advice, and thank you to Masterworks for sponsoring this segment of the video. Moving on to the design of the iPad Pro M2, it's worth mentioning that there are no visual design changes in its form factor this year. It's still as premium as ever, and it looks great. The 12.9-inch model features a brighter and higher contrast liquid Retina XDR mini LED display. Wow, that is a long term. Whereas the 11-inch variant is unchanged with liquid Retina display, but has 120Hz ProMotion refresh capability, which is nice. If you pick from the two, go with the 12.9-inch, especially if you're working off the iPad Pro and using apps like Procreate. The brighter display is going to make a difference in your workflow, absolutely. The must-have accessory with the iPad Pro M2 is of course the Apple Pencil Generation 2. It'll set you back $129, but it's worth every penny. Yes, it's aimed at creatives and digital artists and illustrators, but you can mark up documents and jot down notes if you enjoy a good old notepad and pencil setup. And although there's no changes to the Apple Pencil itself, we do get a neat new feature called Apple Pencil Hover that is extremely useful for particularly graphic designers and illustrators. As the name suggests, it shows you where exactly you're pointing your Apple Pencil without touching the screen. This way, we're able to now write, sketch, and illustrate with more flexibility by preempting how watercolors mix, for example. You can even see widgets and apps expand on the home screen as you move over them now. It works through an electromagnetic signal that's emitted from the tip of the Apple Pencil, and as long as it's 12 millimeters away from the screen, which is pretty close to the screen to be honest, it'll be detected in this hover state. It is by no means a groundbreaking feature, but it is a very, very useful tool for creatives, and maybe more gimmicky for the everyday user like you and I. Now, snap on Apple's Magic Keyboard and you do have an incredibly powerful portable device that almost rivals a laptop, if not for the iPad operating system. It begs the question for those looking to upgrade the devices, iPad Pro M2 or a MacBook. I think it's a no-brainer. If you're the 1% who is an illustrator or graphic designer, for example, who operate exclusively off an iPad and Procreate, for example, then the new iPad Pro M2 is the iPad to go for. Heck, you won't go wrong with the M1 still, and you could pocket the savings if that's something you'd like to do. If you're basically everyone else, I'd be inclined to get a MacBook Air M2 if you're looking for M2 power in a portable package simply for the dedicated keyboard and the Mac operating system alone. This is especially the case, and my recommendation, when you factor in the fact that there's only $100 difference between the base MacBook Air M2 and the iPad Pro M2 12.9 inch. That is definitely something to take into consideration. And honestly, there is not an awful amount more to say about the new iPad Pro M2. It is great for what it is. Heck, it is the best, full stop. But during a time when Apple's new processors are so capable, people can find a long-term value from them more than ever. Not many, if anyone, needs to upgrade every year. So if you already have an M1 device or the iPad Pro M1, then your mileage will vary with the iPad Pro M2. If you're upgrading from an older iPad like the 4th generation iPad Pro with the A15 chip, like I had in this video, this is a great time to make an upgrade. And if you made it to the end of this video, comment the code word BMW M2, yes, the car, just for fun and to confuse other viewers who didn't make it to the end, and I'll give it a like. I'll also drop my long-term review of the iPad Air M2 right here after spending a month with it every day. It's definitely a device you'll want to consider if you're looking for more portability and not too concerned about maximum power. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.